Test, Steve West and Nick Smith. Steve, you want to come up? Do you want to go public with your announcement?
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Little update on their opening presentation about the charge network in New Zealand, and they've had some good news. Steve, do you want to tell them about it?
Yeah, sure. So I got the news kind of secondhand through our charging station supplier, but it turns out that BMW want to, how should I put it, sponsor us, and so they want to give us a couple of €100,000 to encourage us to roll out our network. No strings attached. Well, that was easy.
Yeah. That's
Time to retire.
not much to elaborate on that, other than even a blind hog gets an acorn down again.
a little more expedited.
The only thing I would say about that is, you know, a lot of people don't do things because they look really hard. I've got a problem with my kids, actually, confusing some elements of the English language. And they have, somewhere along the idea, gotten the idea that easy and good are synonyms. You can use them interchangeably in the English language, and that hard and bad are somehow associated. They actually have no connection at all. Mostly when I'm picking targets, if it's an easy one, I assume if it needed to be done, somebody would be doing it. If it needs to be done and somebody isn't doing it, somebody will be soon enough, and I don't need to fool with it. Now, if it looks hard, that might be a target of opportunity. But it's because I know a couple of things, I think, about how the universe works. But once you go in motion towards something, the world changes a little bit. And then what suddenly out of left field, here is something you can use to get there. But you can also use that to leverage something else, and that helps you a little bit. And then this other thing, and to me it's like stone soup. I just bring the stone, and actually most of you all do all the work. In Steve's case, he's planted a stick in the sand. Doesn't make any sense. I don't know if I'm ever going to make any money on it, but I'm going to put fast charging in Kiwi Land. And he sticks his stick in the sand, or drops the stone in the pot of water, and then here's BMW. Hey, a couple €100,000 if that would help. It doesn't actually help that much. I mean, the damn chargers are 40 grand installed, but it's a help. But beyond the money, now the stick in the sand is we're going to do a DC fast charging network in New Zealand, and BMW loves the idea and they're with us. Well, now when you're talking to somebody else, it's a very different thing simply because BMW is involved. Now, should it be a different thing? Is BMW going to do a goddamn thing other than send the check to further this? No, they're along for the ride. But that's a good thing. And then something else, it comes in with the state or with one of the utility companies, and all of a sudden, if BMW thinks it's a good idea, they want to make sure everybody knows that they actually invented this. They had this idea several years ago, and they're allowing Steve and Nick and BMW to share in their idea. And if you present that to another utility company, all of a sudden the government's like, you know, technically we lead on these things, and we have a grant program, and so it's a matter of sticking the stick in the sand in the first place. And the world changes along the way. If you have a clear purpose that you can communicate and other people can identify. So enough about that.
Kind of like putting music on the ice cream truck?
It is a little bit like putting music on the ice cream truck, or a picture of a big ice cream cone. A lot of the kids can't read.
You got that
And
right.
that goes for a lot of the adults too. So enough about that. But congratulations, Steve and Nick, and good on ya, go girlfriend.
Worth being late for.
Strange place for Jack Rickard and EVTV this year. We're not building very many cars or boats. We have a lot of them. And I just, Mark was quizzing me about, you know, what could you guys do to help fix some of these cars? And it's embarrassing to admit, I'm not sure. I don't know a whole lot about them. And what I did know, I can't remember. Because that's not where my head's been. And we're going to do cars, and we're going to do boats. Maybe we'll do airplanes. But for the immediate present, let me share with you kind of where I see us specifically going in the near future, maybe the next year, and kind of prioritize a little bit. As you know, I'm kind of in a glow and enamored over the Tesla drive unit, and that's going to eat a lot of time. The Tesla chargers are 10 kilowatt and fairly small, liquid cooled. And I don't think that one's going to be real hard because Byron's already found the connectors. And actually, the connectors is the hard part, not the easy part. The code is actually not that hard, but the connectors can be a pain in the ass. Particularly if you're a guy who's never been a connector you liked. So I don't really know them by name, because I don't hang out with them any more than I have to. But Byron and Brian Cochane, who's way in the back, have an unholy familiarity with these connector things. I think they've been spending way too much time with them. I don't entirely approve, but I will take advantage of it. And so the Tesla charger is very much on the radar screen, and you'll kind of see why. As you all know now, or as you all now know, having finally been to the barbecue at Jack's house, it's scheduled every year on Thursday evening. And it has forever been rained out. You might understand my attraction with electric vehicles, as my commute is about 700 yards round trip. And I traveled a great deal when I was a child or a young man in the Uncle Sam's Canoe Club. So I really don't care to go anywhere. I don't want to go cross country. If I did want to go cross country, I personally own an Air Force, and I wouldn't take a car. And so you'll understand my lack of fascination with the roar of the V8 and the feeling of power, because I have a Lear 24D if I want loud noises and power, or speed. You can't catch me in your electric car.
DC3 is pretty big too.
It's loud, and it does go pretty fast, but the Lear 24, if I want to go fast and make a lot of noise, that's the one. And I'm personally rated in it. I do need a co-pilot. But he doesn't have to be much of a pilot. He just has to man the right seat for me to be legal. And so, despite that, the objection has moved from how far does it go, how long does it take to charge, to can I drive it cross country? And this is partly Elon's fault and partially the media, but that is now the perceived difficulty. We're actually going to give an award. Did anybody drive an electric car here to Cape Girardeau? Okay, we got 4. 4.5, that's right. You know, you really caught me off guard. I gave you the Copperfoil Helmet Award one year, but I like the whole idea better all the time. I like you better all the time. The RAV4 with a VW pusher. He was regaling me with tales of his attempts to license it as a trailer. But in any event, what do we got? 3 here. How far?
400.
400?
120.
120?
500 from Atlanta?
500 from Atlanta. You drove an electric car 500 from Atlanta.
Yeah.
We have a trophy for you, actually. And in fact, I had them set out. The trophies this year look a little different. We're going to award those tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock after the car show. And so you'll be the driven furthest in an electric car.
What about the Toyota with the?
That's fine, yeah. Actually.
He got 22 miles per gallon.
So that's driving cross country is kind of a, so we've kind of cast a stick in the sand on fast charging for your cars, converted electric cars. And we actually did pretty well. We got hardware and software and cables and everything together with Damien, who is our keynote speaker this year, but he didn't show up again. And we had a further problem. We were pretty deep into it and fighting pretty hard. We've got a lot of code to fix some things that were not broken. As it turns out, the EVSE was. And understandably so. The CHAdeMO specification, and we had a big fight about this, I like 1.0.0, and Paulo and Damien vote for 0.9.0. And I never did real clear on that. But specifies that the output for CHAdeMO DC to DC charging is from 50 to 500 volts. And we worked with Damien as our test guinea pig, and his Model E, I don't remember what he calls it, the land yacht, I think. No, Der Panzer is the later model. We worked with land yacht. And this was a 170 volt car, and fortunately, the CHAdeMO station closest to his house is a
AeroVironment?
Yeah, I think it was the
AeroVironment,
Yep.
which is very big, very heavy, very well done, and very early CHAdeMO fast charge station. And we actually got it to charge. The logs I looked at, it was operating perfectly, flawlessly. So we went to the next charge station, and it failed. And so we started trying to fix the code. Collin doing most of the fixing, and me as a hangers-on, offering lots of free advice without doing a whole lot of the work, which I can do rather broadly. But I did read the logs a lot and offer various misconstrued opinions as to what was going on. And we went to a third charger and had the same bad result. And what we found out by successive approximation is that most of the EVSE out there does not charge from 50 to 500 volts, but from about 250 to 500 volts. And so it was trying to charge his car. It would put out a few amps, break down, and discontinue the cycle because his 170 volts was too low. He raised it to 200 or 210, and that didn't scratch the itch either. Now, before you sink into umbrage and rage, it is a paper spec from Japan. How many OEM cars are out there that would require a charge less than 250 volts?
0.
And how many will be out there?
0.
So if you take the first answer, which was 0, was that right, Mike? And you sum it with the second answer to do a cyclic redundancy check here.
Multiplied by a million.
multiply it by 1,000,000
Yep.
and divide by a Brazilian, it still comes out to 0. So why should they? So this is an act of gravity defiance us wanting them to charge our 120 volt cars. It's not going to happen. But the program kind of stalled out. Here's the installation user manual for the EVTV CHAdeMO fast charging kit for electric vehicles, and here's the center of that, a Yazaki plug, which will pass around. It's unfortunately about a $900 deal. I did play with some 3D printed ones and some urethane cast in silicone rubber things, and that's not going to go anywhere. 2 contactors, a relay, maybe a shunt, and we have a charge kit for CHAdeMO, and so that's one of the targets of opportunity. Now, as I did mention, I think, and for yours only, the Tesla supercharge network is CHAdeMO. They do transmit the VIN number in a series of 3 scan message IDs. And they do have kind of an interesting, but only to me and Collin, you would never have an interest in it, function where you can go from an established CHAdeMO state back to an earlier state that isn't precisely in the spec. And after that, it's a 33.3 kilobit single wire CAN, which was why our fascination with having that in CAN duty. It wasn't precisely for the Evansbacher, or it was a handy thing to test with. And so that's kind of the future to me, for me personally, as far as what I devote my time and attention to, is the Tesla drive unit, the Tesla charger, the CHAdeMO charge kit, and the Tesla supercharger network. And that's just the targets of opportunity I place the highest value on. It's not that I couldn't be distracted by something else, but right now those are the ones where I see the highest density of value return for effort. There we go. I thought the lights were going out. So that's, right now I want to talk about the CHAdeMO kit, which is awkward because I love to talk about our products and I love you to buy them. This one's not available. Really for any amount of money. Along the way, our use of Paulo's 8-bit Atmega multiprocessor, it became evident that this was not going to get us every place this concept would likely take us. And so we're going to have to retool. Paulo's mother is actually this week, I think, having an operation for colon cancer in Portugal. And his semester at ICO, or whatever it is, starts about now, which is kind of the 2 reasons he's not here and why some of our hardware designs have lagged. We're probably going to replace this with the JetQ hardware. It's got almost what I need to make this happen. It's short a couple of things. We have to be able to measure voltages, and so probably take some of John Hardy's op-amp concept with our isolated analog inputs, and presto changeo, we can measure a pack voltage, and maybe do the same thing with the thermistor to get temperature, at least one. And then the limb cab is very serviceable. for current. And that's the three things that the JEBQ is missing. We have plenty of other inputs and outputs and plenty of horsepower and a pretty nice enclosure. I'd like to migrate JEBQ at some point to the cinch enclosure from the metal box we have now. So that's where we're going. In this one, I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about CHAdeMO, and Collin's going to offer lots of corrections to the parts that got wrong. Oh, I'll show this. Here's the components that we were going to include in the kit. The charge connector, our charge controller. This is just a connector for that. 2 gigawatt contactors, a relay, a temperature sense probe, a USB connection, and I actually bought some lab grade kind of 0.01% shunts, 400 amps.
Yeah, quick question. The problem with the low voltage environment with CHAdeMO, do you think that we'll have the same problem in the United States?
I would say probably it would be exacerbated in the United States.
So there's no hope of lower voltages?
I'd say it's fairly rare you're going to find one of the aero environments that works. And that most of the charge stations here almost certainly are not going to charge below 250 volts. That's the DC voltage.
So you're packed.
I had an email exchange with someone from Zero Motorcycles, and they used to offer CHAdeMO. They don't because of that.
Yeah, what you don't want is a CHAdeMO charge kit where you can charge your car at some CHAdeMO stations and not at others, and you have no idea which are which.
Friend of mine works.
And to take off cross country that way.
A friend of mine works at Schneider. He's been developing the user interface on their CHAdeMO machine. I can bug him and get an inside answer on how low are they intending for theirs to actually go. But that'd be select on their machines.
Or you could just ask me.
Yeah.
It's 250 volts because, Mike, how many?
0.
0. Okay. Were you here for that part, maybe?
Being mean, Jim.
Why do they need the additional cost to charge a car below 250 volts? There's 0 market for it. And by the way, when you go to a CHAdeMO, you don't pay anything for the electricity anyway. So there's not an economic basis to do your motorcycle and daily drive. It doesn't exist. The future of electric vehicles is going to be kind of to dance to the tune of the commonly accepted designs among the automobile manufacturers. You can say they're wrong and do it your way, and you might be right.
But you'll be lonely now.
You're going to be alone.
Like Swiss?
Yeah. So they're not technically CHAdeMO.
Right. Let me see.
Flash chargers.
It says CHAdeMO compliant. It's not. Well, asterisk means something.
Jack, I just found a data sheet for one made in Switzerland, the EVTEC unit, claiming to be both CHAdeMO compliant and having a voltage range of only 250 to 420 volts DC.
And it only does
That
80
seems
kilowatts.
most common.
What do the 2 asterisks mean?
Now,
At the time that we talked about it, people were saying that it's because it would be so horrifically expensive to get magnetic components that could range down to 50 volts up to 500. That's such a large sweep in voltage to try to maintain, 60 amps or something, that it's just not economical to do, so they don't do it.
When you do 150 amps, never mind the 300 I want, a coil, the last one I had priced by a guy who builds those, was 1,800 a piece, quantity 20. And so, but again, rein in your umbrage and your rage. Why? Michael, what was the number? 0. There are no manufactured electric vehicles, except for motorcycles, I stand corrected,
I was going to say motorcycle.
that operate at voltages under 250 volts. How much do they want to spend on catering to the end of the specification where there are no vehicles other than Nabil's? Have you seen his handsome Harley look-alike? It's a direct knockoff of a Harley Davidson powered by an alternator.
I think the hardtail guys.
I might get him and his buddy to talk about that a little later today.
Something.
Yeah.
You can't write a spec and then ignore it.
This-
Put 50 volts in there for.
They totally ignore it.
You know, Mike, I worked for defense contractors for 12 years.
Write a deviation, call it good.
I could write a book on that. I think I did, a couple of them. This is kind of a, it's like a schematic, but more like a diagram or something. Of our CHAdeMO Yazaki connector that's being passed around. These numbers kind of relate to this interface here, and these pins 9, 8, 1, 4, 7, 10, 2, 5, and 6. And that's the interface between the car over here and the CHAdeMO charge station over here. Most of the people, like with the Nissan Leafs and stuff, think that this charge station is magic. Actually, it's the dumbest part of it. I cannot persuade them. They're sure the charge station limits their charging of the Nissan Leaf. Actually, Idaho National Labs, I mentioned this a week or two ago, they found you have to charge it to a certain point, unplug it, and charge it again. And they don't know why either. But it's the car. It's not EVSE. In fact, the car is in charge of the entire charge process. The EVSE does very little as far as determining when you start, how much you charge, or at what voltage, or at what current, or when you stop. It doesn't do any of that.
Okay, so the ones we use, they, because the protocol includes the state of charge from the vehicle, our ones actually do stop when they see the vehicle has reached 80%. That's their default mode of operation.
That's not in the spec.
They need to check
That's
the
another
spec.
example of not following the specification.
We do advise the target fully charged voltage to the EVSE, and what we found was that's not really your target voltage. That's a voltage you want the EVSE to observe. In case you get lost, they will not charge past that.
Yeah.
And if he has modified that to be at 80% charge, he has a fast charge station, it is not CHAdeMO compliant. I'm sorry.
No, it's not based on voltage, it's based on the state of charge being reported over the CAN bus from the vehicle.
The car does report, I think, the number of kilowatt hours that have charged so far.
Yes, it
Or
does.
it tells you the state of the pack. So that's supposed to, the spec says that that's for informational purposes only. So they're basically completely ignoring the spec.
Yes. How does it start? Here's our can high and can low numbers. It starts by sharing common ground. when
No,
we plug in.
If you want to have a
Yeah.
list of the way it starts.
Okay.
Well, you have to choose that before you start.
The order of progression here.
Yeah, I've got a list.
Well, maybe you can walk us through this, but I want to see the diagram on the screen. So,
the
so
diagram.
write the list on your arm, and,
We may have to go back and forth. Yeah.
Well, you could read it off here.
See, here's the same type of chart that he had.
Yeah,
yeah, that's
Back and
close.
forth.
that's it.
Go back over kind of, this is what happens when you plug it in. The charger sends the start a charge signal by pulling pin 2 up to 12 volts. That's how we know on our side that something has happened.
Let's go back to the picture. I'm not sure that's the
Supposedly.
beginning.
That's pin 2. The charger connects this here. That's charge sequence signal 2, signal 1.
You're jumping in the middle here, I think. We get a common ground. We have 12 volts going to our device on pin 7, and on plugging in, that's when we get connector proximity
Yeah, I
detection.
guess you do get that first. It's not listed.
Right, and that drops our 12 volts. I use a pull-up resistor and just have 12 volts in a pull-up resistor. When you plug it in, it picks up this ground and drops that voltage from 12 to
Yeah, they're just
some low
showing a
value that we
opto
read as a
isolator.
0. They're showing an opto isolator in their car. We're not going to use that. Let's put mine back up. And we'll make this up as we go along. It'll be close.
That's kind of the paper standard.
So we want to know that we've been connected at all. And when you plug in, we have a common ground here, which we need to be able to do the next thing. And that is, I have 12 volts, a pull-up resistor, and an input to the JevQ or other controller enable input, which is set at 1. When I pick up this ground, indicating I have a connection, that drops this to 0 volts. And my controller at that point is alerted that it has been plugged into, or it has plugged into. And that's all it's determined at that point. Now what's next? I think, do we start CAN at that point?
I have written down that this then starts, but I'm not sure that this drops in. Once we get this, that this will drop in too.
Okay. And that's another input into our controller.
Yeah, to
And
tell us
that-
that the charger's ready to start receiving.
So we're ready to start.
Then we
and-
send the can.
And then we start a CAN dialogue. And that is an exchange of preliminary information about what the,
We tell the EVSC what battery voltage we have, the battery parameters, what kind of max current we could accept,
Mhm.
and those kinds of things. It just
And that's
tells
where we
them-
give it a voltage, I think of it
Yeah.
as a safety voltage. Don't,
Yeah,
if we ever get to this voltage,
Cut her off.
quit.
and that's the crazy part. What you're doing is telling the EVSC your parameters, and it's supposed to say back, I support that,
Mhm.
or no, that's not going to work.
All right.
What has happened to us is it says, oh yeah, I support that,
Mhm.
and then we start charging, and it doesn't.
All right. We give it the voltage and we give it the current, and it says we're fully compliant and we can do that. Except they can't. Or most of them can't. And so we've got the conversation, we conclude that, and I think at that point we set charge enable, is that right?
We ground pin 4 here.
Right. And that opto isolator here comes on in the EVSE, and it takes that as a, this is the real beginning of the charge. After that, I'm a little lost.
After that is the isolation check.
Yes. Oh, that's right. They do a whole ramp up to 500 volts on pins 6 and 5, and back down to check to see if there's any leakage. And on our side, I think we're supposed to do that too, and we don't do that.
We don't do any isolation checks.
Then what happens? Pin 10?
If the isolation check succeeds, the charger grounds pin 10.
Right. And we take that, again, a pull-up resistor and 12 volts. They're applying the ground right here, and that is charger start 2, I think.
Yep.
And when do we get 1?
That was way at the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah, we
I
did
must
one
have
before
skipped
the
that.
10 was.
1 starts that process of talking back and forth
Oh,
to
that's
see if
right.
our parameters
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah, that's
If we
when,
agree
that's
that
when we
that
started the
should
CAN
work.
conversation. At that point, this signal is our 12 volts to energize our contactors, and it's been there for some time. But we have to vote too, and we do that with output 0 on pin D5, our box, and that's apply ground here to a relay we use to provide the grounds to both contactors. And so they vote on closing the contactor, and we vote. And a key element of CHAdeMO is you only open and close the contactor when there's no current flow. And that keeps your contactor from arc welding and causing a lot of safety issues. And at that point, we're pretty much in software. Collin, can you walk us through the ramp up?
Yeah, at that point, with that signal closes the contactors, over CAN we start to request current. And what we have to do is we request a current, the EVSE reports back the current that is actually outputting.
And we measure the current. And then we measure the
Yeah,
current.
and we measure the current on our side. What we're trying to do is match them and step up gradually so that what it reports and what we measure equalizes, and we're always staying about 5% between what it reports and what we measure. And then once we're within 5%, we step up again, and it just keeps creeping. And we go up and up and up as high as the car feels comfortable or as high as the EVSE can output.
Right.
Because some of the EVSEs, the standard is, I believe, up to 120 or 125 amps.
Mhm.
Some of the chargers cannot do it. So if the charger can only do 60, it will tell us during the initial talks, and we'll only request 60.
Right.
But we go up as high as we want and step on up until we finally hit the plateau where we're happy and we're charging full blast. Then it is our responsibility on the car side, when we're starting to get up towards the top of the pack, to try to taper off. And if you look at Nissan Leaf captures, you'll see they do that.
Let's go back to here. We request a current. They change the current and report to us what current they think they're sending. We measure the current and compare it to what they're reporting, and then go to the next step.
Yeah, we're always trying to stay within 5% of what they report to what we measure, so that there's no disparities.
Right. And kind of what's the speed of that ramp up? We tried different ones.
I believe that the spec says that you can ramp up 1 amp per message, about 10 amps per second, I think. So it might take 12 seconds to reach the top, but that's still fairly rapid.
Mhm. So at that point, we're exchanging on CAN some regular messages where they're reporting what current they're sending, what voltage they sense us at. We're reporting what current we're seeing and what voltage we think we're at and what the target voltage is. And that conversation is continuous. And we tend to be in a constant current mode, observing the voltage coming up.
You know what we forgot to mention?
What?
Somewhere, we forgot to mention the spec, before this closes here, the CHAdeMO connector has a big heavy lock on it.
Yeah.
You do not want to be able to pull the CHAdeMO connector out while 120 amps is flowing. The whole time that we're talking here with the current flowing, that connector is locked. There's basically impossible to remove.
Did that happen on Charger Start 2?
I think. It happens in between these two at some point. I think it's on Charge
Okay.
Start 2. The
We
connector
don't
locks.
have to do much about it or acknowledge it, but they report to it that, yes, there is a connection. That's one thing in their message.
Yeah.
So there's that. The entire control of when it quits charging is left up to us, except for a couple of emergency situations, like if the voltage shoots up to the don't charge past. And I do think we send them a target kilowatt hours.
Yeah. We send.
I don't know what they do with
yeah.
it exactly.
It's supposed to be informational. We send the total pack capacity
Mhm.
and then what our current pack capacity
Current
is.
capacity is, yeah. So if your charger does that, we know how to work around it.
You could lie to it.
I could lie to it. It's got, the car is really in control. When we get to our target voltage, or if you like, a little bit shy of it perhaps, we start decreasing the current request. And again, we decrease the request. They respond with what they're changing it to. They change it. We measure the change, and all that has to agree. And so we taper the current down while observing the voltage and holding it there.
Yeah, our goal, the software attempts to maintain, basically it's a constant voltage phase at that point where a charger is in constant current or constant voltage. We actually have to handle that. The EVSE is too dumb to be CCCV mode. So we request current at a constant once we ramp up, and then we're responsible for lowering it to try to keep the voltage below the target, because if you hit the target threshold, the charger cuts you right off.
And that's probably going to be kind of a configurable option. That taper is where the additional time and not much additional charge happens. And so we're probably going to, kind of like our chargers, where they can set an in current.
Yeah.
That'd probably be the best way to configure it. Where if I want to charge at 125 amps and quit when it falls below 124, you're just going to charge the voltage and quit.
Yeah.
If you want to come down to 40 amps, you can set it at that and wherever you want to be. But understand the concept of fast charging is to get you done quickly. And it's sort of by successive approximations from your constant voltage. When you go into the constant voltage phase, you're putting in less and less charge over time and getting less and less for your time after that. So my instinct would be with LiPo 4 is I can do 95%. I'm almost 95% at 100% current at 3C. So I'm done when we get there. But understand, the software in the car is the only determinant of that, other than an emergency situation, a break in the connection check or the latch or something like that. And then we kind of agree to an orderly shutdown, and how does that go? I don't remember, actually. You'll have to walk us through that, if
Well,
anybody.
the first thing is one side or the other will send a request that zero current happen. If the charger faults, it will start telling us that we should provide zero current. If we decide we're done, we'll set zero current, and both sides begin to wait until the current actually is zero.
Right.
They're looking for that. Then the contactor will open back up once the current is zero. It's like Jack said, you don't want the contactor to open under load. Under an emergency situation, if the charger is about to catch fire or something, it actually can short circuit, but 99% of the time, we're waiting for zero current and then opening the contactor and unlocking the charge cord so that you can remove it from the vehicle.
Mhm. So that's pretty much the full cycle, isn't it? Is there any peculiars that would bearing mention? really either side can declare very easily an emergency shutdown at any time, and there's an orderly shutdown process, but it's the same as the normal shutdown process.
The protocol has a large number of faults that the controller can set. From what I've seen, they don't generally bother.
Yes, one of the specific faults is that it's long battery type.
Yeah,
And they never set it, even though we're below the voltage they can charge.
Yeah.
And they never set that.
They usually just set a generic general fault, and
Mhm.
it's all over.
So they don't really use the full fault set very well that's in the spec. And that's kind of CHAdeMO. I think it's the hole to scurry to. I don't see anything very good happening with SA Combi and Tesla Superchargers kind of out there in the future for us. But there are technically more sites, both in the US and in Europe, that do CHAdeMO than do a supercharger. There's more connections with the supercharger actually, because they'll have 6 or 8 or 12 stalls on some of these sites. But and it's variable, as Nikki Gordon-Broomstick discovered. It's very orderly in the UK, and they have some fantastic CHAdeMO charge network, and Ireland is absolutely replete with them. You go into France, and chaos reigns. And it's you'll show up at one, and the cable has been hacked off and taken to the junkyard to be turned in for the cost of copper. And so that's the situation. But I think CHAdeMO, now here's one of the problems I have in taking the lead in developing a CHAdeMO solution for the DIY community. I don't have a CHAdeMO charge station. I don't have a car that charges CHAdeMO, and I don't have a charge station to test with. The nearest one's 110 miles. The nearest Tesla is 120, and I'll get a Tesla here next year, but we may never get a CHAdeMO and keep running unless I build one. That's the other end of this on my target-rich environment, I think somebody called it the other day. I have a different view of how fast charging would be done because of the issue of putting chargers out along the interstate highway system in places where 3-phase here in the U.S. is hard to obtain. And of course, I think all fast charging and slow charging should be done with solar panels and so on and so forth. We will develop, and it's relatively trivial to develop, as I say. This side has most of the intelligence. This side is not hard. It's hard to generate 150 amps. It's not hard to generate the intelligence to be a charge station. And so I'll probably develop one here, but if I have the charge station here that I develop, Collin and I and others, and we have a car kit here that we develop, and it works perfectly with each other. We have how many of those in the world, Mike? One on each end. And they're perfectly compatible with the other one. And so that's a bit of a problem. But I think we can march to this. They're sprouting up around Collin. Mark has some near him. He doesn't really have a car, but he's got a battery pack he can put on his pickup truck, and he's kind of interested in the topic. So, and so we might be able to scare up some help here on working it out. I think the basic part is one of those problems that the getting 90% there is going to be real easy, and it'll take 90% of the effort. And then the other 10% will be wrestling all the variants where they didn't follow the spec to the ground, and that'll take the other 90% of the effort.
What we need is like a net world interop of cars and chargers, like they used to do for Ethernet stacks.
You know, they actually have that.
Oh,
Idaho National Labs again
okay.
hosts some of the OEMs and the CHAdeMO guys, and they all get together and party like rock stars. And their announcement is that it all works great. I don't know. But we've not been part of that or invited to it. You have to remember that I am considered on a national and a world scale as being little and ugly, and my mother dresses me funny, and you guys are following me. If that tells you where you are. So we don't get invited to a lot of the parties. And they would really prefer we don't exist. I don't know why. If I was going to do a manufactured car, it would not only be open source, but interchangeable. I think the Volkswagen Beetle is a classic example of the world car that everybody adopted and re-adopted and did over for 60 or 70 years. How bad a thing is that for an automobile manufacturer? And how much of a coincidence is it that VW is the largest auto manufacturer in the world? What lessons do I need to take from this if I don't know anything about cars or car industry? And so I really, it's not that I'm just not sympathetic, I don't even understand what they're on about. What would be best for them, what would be best for Tesla is for him to open source a car, like you said. Let everybody play, let everybody do mods, let everybody do add-ons. Let it be the most hot-rodded car in history. What's that going to do to your user base? It can't in any instant decrease it at all, other than the very small numbers of people who simply hop it up too hot and kill themselves in it. And it would be very difficult to separate those from the ones that are already picking them up at the Tesla service center and shouldn't be driving 400 horsepower anyway. And one guy with the brand new P85D,
We couldn't even get it out of the parking lot.
had 44 minutes on the car when the salvage guy bought it. He didn't make it home in the car. And so that happens. But if I was an automotive manufacturer, I want a fan club. I want to be the car that everybody picks to do cool things with and make it look even better than I did. Why would anybody want the other end of that, which is, I'm not sure what. I was talking to Craig Smith this morning before I came in, and one of the issues, of course, is safety. This has been the trade here in the United States for the last 50 years, is a promise by our government that if you will give us some control over your personal choice in life, we will make you safe. They can't make you safe. Now, yesterday you alluded to the fact that you could come in over the air on Star or something, broadcast a 00, disable the car and kill you. For 100 years, I've had the technology to cut your brake line with a hacksaw anyway. I can throw a brick through your windshield. I can put a bomb under your hood. What's the crypto safety for that? General Motors cannot make me safe from other people who want to do harm to me or my car. They do not have this ability. What they would have ability to do through heroic efforts on their part is to make me safe from General Motors and ignition key incidents, but it would take a corporate revamp to adopt that culture. The only one GM can make me safe from is GM. So what's all this about? I think the source code should not only be required, but required to be heavily commented for the firmware in the ECU and printed in at least a 12-point font on the underside of the freaking hood. But that's because we're the guys getting the phone calls from the orphan cars. The what would you call it, the Azure Dynamics E-Transit Connect. You're not gonna believe me how much I hear from Ford dealers about that car. I've sold 40 E-Gear drives to Ford. Ford dealers, not the manufacturer. And if that's a clue, it's probably really not that good a drive box. Apparently they're kind of fragile, and something in the snow they break, because they're replacing a lot of them. And I've sold some to you guys, but I don't know what you do with them. We've never used one in anger. But I've still got them if you want them. But I can tell you that Ford replaces an inordinate number of them for the number of E-Transit Connects out there, which can't be more than 286, because that was concealed on my windshield at the factory here in the U.S., and I've sold them 40 E-Gear drives.
And you had one that was just finished, so.
Huh?
You had the one that was just finished when they closed down.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I don't think there's many more than 286 of them out there. The same thing with the Coda. Rick Starr now has 5 operational and 3 gliders, or 4 operational and 2 gliders. He loves the Coda. By the way, the Coda's got a fan club now. There's people who love them. And it's an ugly little car, but underneath is a real nice electric car. You could take all that out and put it in a good body, which is my program, and you can go in and shop the carnage on the pallets in there. You can have the drivetrain, the motor, the inverter, and the bracket that holds it all, and put it in a nice car, and I think it'd be a great thing. But deliberately, they made this to where other people could not do it. And I have personally talked to the software programmers that did that after they had been laid off at Coda, and they were fuck you. If it was a security thing, it should be a security thing. And fortunately, after some able assistance from Collin, I responded to them, fuck you. And the program manager from Coda wanted a copy of the source code. So he wanted it to do something for the security byte. He didn't know what it was. He kind of put me in contact with the coders who had done it, but then he wanted a copy of Collin's code.
So what'd you tell him?
Okay, since you gave me the guy's name, here it is. And I mean, you know, that's my telephone and email thing, while they're up there testifying about how, you know, now lest you be confused that Coda and Azure Dynamics are extremes. General Motors would be bankrupt were it not from the money they took out of your pocket at the point of a gun.
Pontiac, Hummer.
Right. Yes, and even them surviving, we don't have Pontiac and Hummer. And so Chrysler was bailed out a few years before that. There isn't anybody too big to fail, and what happens to the cars when they do? Who are you going to go to?
E-Golfs and so on.
The E-Golfs could easily be, and I would say that the TDI engine in America's under some duress right now. And
Especially in California.
Huh?
Especially in California.
Yes. No, I picture most of the guys that would spend that premium for that sedan may admire German engineering, but it was mostly for green cred. Hey, I get 75 miles per gallon and I'm clean diesel. And they're at the country club now getting ribbed. Oh, clean are ya? Here you drive the dirtiest car in the country. You soot spewing son of a bitch.
My diesel truck runs cleaner.
Yeah, right. And so, how are they going to recover that from?
Well, that makes you wonder now, what beats the program is the checkers plugging into the OB2 connector. Is that that what triggers it?
You know, I was kind of guessing on that, but some of the other writers are guessing too about steering wheel position and so forth. I tried to get Craig to say yesterday, and apparently he doesn't know.
Well, Navistars on their big trucks used to have it when you open the hood.
You would need to plug into the
Yeah,
LED.
That's what Navistars was, is when you pulled the hood open, the light
Go.
came on and told you, okay, go in the clean mode.
We tried several different ramps. I think we got one up in 3 or 4 seconds, but there is a recommendation for the speed, and it is,
I thought the recommendation was 1 amp every 100 milliseconds, so it's about 10 amps a second up, and it's double. I know it's double whatever the up is down, so down should be 20 amps a second downward.
I wanted to know RTFM. Got it.
Yeah, but isn't it a 100 millisecond update anyway, so isn't it just like updating 1 amp every message, pretty much?
Yeah, so it's 1 amp every message, and you get 10 messages a second. So you're about 10 amps a second that you can ramp up, and 20 amps a second you can ramp down, because they allow you to ask for 2 less amps every message downward.
And in practice, did the CHAdeMO stations that you played with, did they do that? Or
They seem to be able to support that.
say what?
Did the stations in practice be able to support that?
Yes, some confusion because we're stepping up and suddenly they drop the connection. That we're going too fast maybe, or we're going too slow maybe, or we went back and forth on the 100 milliseconds. I said the spec it's 100 milliseconds plus or minus 10%. Collin, I don't think it matters. I think he was right. But I mean, we tried a number of things, but eventually we found out it was cratering because it couldn't do the current into that low voltage. Go.
I'm just looking at some telemetry of a charge session on one of our units, and it increased 45 amps in 2 seconds.
45 amps in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Again, there is a recommendation in the spec, but I don't think it's
I'll bet you can ramp a lot faster than what we're doing. It's just, the spec says that it should at least be able to do 1 amp per update, so 10 amps a second.
But can you not just ask for what you want?
You can ask for what you want, yeah.
And then it'll...
No, you're supposed to ramp it up.
Oh, you're not allowed to just ask for...
I don't think so.
You can, it wants to stay within 5%, I think, so you want to ramp a little bit or it'll start to get carried away and think that something went wrong.
I think it's an
But
overshoot.
I think that we tried asking for 5 amps at a time on the ramp, and it still does work.
But we never did try to just request the
I
whole
don't think you can
current.
go from 0 to 125 in one shot. You have to have some ramp.
Yeah, they had an awful lot of text in the
the
spec
unit
about
in
the
charge of the
ramp.
ramp. I mean, it'll to know.
Cars asking its ramp speed.
So I
That's on a
think as
Nissan
we
Leaf, so that's what it's asking for.
move forward adopting OEM voltages, Dale, that CHAdeMO will be a viable alternative for do-it-yourself EVs. I don't think it's mandatory. As I said, I drive 750 yards round trip in my daily commute. My employer allows me to charge at work. And so it's not important to me other than by demonstration. But a lot of people, and we have 3.5, 4.5 here today, who drove across country to be here in an electric car. And I would like to be able to drive an electric car to a car show in another city or something. I'd like to be able to do that. And so I think the most productive path is CHAdeMO at the moment. And I do not hold out the awe and amazement with Tesla that some do. I think the supercharger network can be done, and I don't have any moral compunctions about doing it. Of course, I own a Tesla, But beyond that, I'm not above working out something where they're happy with the whole situation as well, as long as it includes us charging on their super network, which we are going to do. Maybe not by Christmas, but we are.
So, I'm wondering about if you have a DC or a low voltage electric car, if a battery pack can be designed that can be reconfigured when you plug it in, so going from a parallel series.
A DC to DC converter to step down the voltage to your car.
Pulling them all in series instead of any parallel, stringing the batteries different. I suppose you could do that, but it just seems cost prohibitive.
And it's going to really fuck up the balance.
Yeah, it's going to be, it would be very difficult to do that properly.
It's not a solution I'd go for, but I don't push my cars around with a VW gasoline engine in it. And I'm not saying you're wrong in doing so. It's your goddamn car, drive the damn thing the way you want. That's the central tenet of EVTV. And it's not to be abusive. I literally mean exactly that.
Well, I'm wondering about the cost of it. Like Collin was saying, you know, it'd be cost prohibitive to have a double throw, double pull contactor to reconfigure your back.
It'd be very tough.
I'd be afraid of it in a lot of ways, and here's what we don't want to do, and that's pull up to a CHAdeMO charge station as a DIY self-made car, plug into it, and blow up 4 city blocks. And if you don't get carried away with the BMS thing, I'm confident that we'll be okay, but there's one in every crowd. And when you put that on the front cover of the newspaper, it hurts us all. So that's her.
Yep. Oh, wait, I was just wondering.
Thank you for the whiskey, by the way.
No problem. Did you enjoy it? Elon has announced that he would not make the technologies Tesla use free, but he will professionally charges the other one. He hasn't released anything on the fast charge protocols and technology?
They've released no CAN BBC or data at all, to my knowledge, to anyone.
Well, they said that they weren't going to prosecute patent violation.
Right.
I don't think that protocols for CAN bus are in the patents.
No,
So
they're
you can't find them.
There is description of CAN and the CAN hardware, but they don't. That's not included in the patent application. So, but he actually said he would open source the car, and I was disappointed to learn that that didn't mean firmware and CAN and so forth.
Speaking of firmware, though, we're kind of talking about could the vehicle manufacturers open source their firmware? I think it would be difficult, especially if you want commented source code, because a lot of these people, Ford and GM, they're using Simulink and other high-level languages to auto-generate source code. They've never seen the source code in all likelihood. They don't know what it says.
Then they would have to pay Craig Smith to comment their source code.
Yeah, this is going to be machine-generated, horrible-looking source code that nobody understands.
Well, now, Collin, that's not entirely true. There's a cottage industry, and I have a device for the Cadillac Escalade where I can read out the firmware, make changes to it, and reflash it now. It's an appliance. So people have done this for years. A friend of mine's son did EEPROM chips for ECUs and sold them on eBay, and that's how he got through college and dental school.
Yeah.
So people do this.
They're looking at assembly dumps with
I've seen them
a whole
before.
other ballgame.
They're very ugly.
It's time and desire. He had put him through college.
It can be done, but
And people are doing it.
But if you're looking for the source code, I think we're going to find that it's horrible looking, probably, and that the engineers who designed it didn't really write it, for the most part.
I bet that kid in his bedroom has some gorgeous looking notes before he got it to work.
Yeah.
And
Jack, are they actually changing the software, or are they just changing variables? Are they adding programming?
No, they're
reflashing.
They're reflashing the code.
Because mine
Are they
reflashes.
reflashing the code, but are they changing, or adding software, or changing a variable, a fixed variable?
Editing parameters or changing code lines?
It's like you said, you
Most
can make
of
memory.
it's parameters, but they reflash the EEPROM
Right.
in the ECU.
Changing a variable and changing, you know, a statement or two.
Not to me.
Not regular, with bytes and flags.
In fact, they're exactly the same thing. Collin, do you have a big differentiation between bytes that are commands and bytes that are
Yeah,
bytes?
I think probably what they're doing is changing EEPROM settings and not the flash, but maybe some people are changing the flash. It's not, there is a difference, I guess, between, you could disassemble the source code of the ECU, try to figure out where a section is, change a couple instructions and recompile. But I think understanding the whole firmware, especially in a car, it's millions of lines of code. It's going to be tough to understand.
They can set it where I discount inputs, and it's so big, I've spent another $400 on a book a guy wrote on how to use this tuner software, and it's non-trivial, and my sense is it is not simply table data. That and they do write it, I know they write it to the EEPROM, but I think that they have now changed, they didn't replace it with their program. I think it's, you know, they worked out a bit here and a bit there to do a specific thing with the oxygen sensor or with the that sort of thing.
They've invalidated some error statements and just forced one branch probably.
So when you say did they change the program, I believe they did. Did they rewrite the operating system and replace it with their own entire software? I don't think so. And in fact, one guy was busted by Ford for selling a replacement EEPROM that had some Ford engineers' names in it. And this is a common programming thing, particularly in assembly language, is just to bury some shit in there, so if it shows up somewhere, I can show it to you, but the guy that stole it never saw it, because it was spelled backwards, or it was encrypted, or essentially a watermark on your software.
50 volts.
Common technique for
This is the CHAdeMO certified testing data.
Right.
50 volts.
Yeah.
They say that they
Is
can
there anything
find
on the
that.
777?
But on the one spec.
Is there anything about 777?
Boeing 777.
Cobalt living
John, what's the latest
I
thing?
haven't done anything very recently, but I've read the, both the Japanese and the US NTSB and JTSB report. I don't think they've really got a clue what they're talking about.
My understanding was the fix was to put it in a better container, more tightly contained, to make
Higher pressure.
To make it go boom better.
Higher pressure bomb.
Maybe it's
And I think they've had, reading between the lines, they've had at least one go off.
So it's
50 volts to 500.
I could be wrong. I still think that because of the varying amount of time on each airplane between these incidents, and then some of them happening right together, that sounds like a function of APU time. How much time did it spend on the ground with a 32 volt APU charging the batteries at a voltage the battery guys think is okay because it's within the charge voltage, but it's not within the open circuit voltage. On the other hand, John charged some LiPos for a very long time in the garden, and they never went off.
I've had some LiPo cells sitting at 4.4 volts per cell for the last 18 months, and they're steadfastly refusing to blow up.
So I could be wrong.
You joked about blowing up 4 city blocks, but seriously, what is the worst that could go wrong with that?
Watching Oregon State
If
University
you
battery.
overcharge a lithium battery sufficiently, I think the coolest photos are from the Princess of Scandinavia. And then kind of in an enclosed space. There was a guy in the UK that originally is what put me onto this, that did a kind of a bad boy charger in his own BMS design and put it on at 6 p.m. and at 2 p.m. it blew, and the next morning he had melted glass and a melted transmission and nothing but ashes, and he has assured everybody that I'm completely wrong. It had nothing to do with the BMS or overcharging the batteries.
Is there any danger to the actual EVSE?
I don't think you could hurt it because the EVSE is constantly monitoring its current. And I think what was happening with Damien's car is his voltage was so low, the current was fluctuating up and down like crazy, trying to regulate. And the circuitry in the EVSE is looking at that and says, nope, that's not right. It's gone. So the EVSE is very well protected. I've never seen any real danger, except that Damien has actually been able to cause them to put the service light on and disable themselves for good until a technician comes. But I mean, it didn't catch fire. It just, the EVSE said, this doesn't seem right. We'd better turn off.
If the car blows and it's 3 feet from the EVSE, you know, I mean, and it's not so much an explosion, but it's an extremely hot fire, like over 5,000 degrees. The critical element on a LiPo force are all lithium fires, and I doubt anybody cares about this, but John and I like to talk about these sort of things. Is they generate their own oxygen. Once you go into thermal runaway, at some point, the cathode starts to release oxygen. Lithium cobalt cells, I'm going to make all these numbers up, but remember I have a special dispensation from the Pope. I can do that. I'll usually be pretty close. 180 degrees centigrade, lithium cobalt. Lithium manganese, 240. Lithium iron phosphate, 340 or 350.
It's higher than that.
Centigrade.
It's higher than that.
No, I think about 350 is
The one we
first.
chopped in half and threw in the wood-burning stove at over 1,000 degrees never caught. They were glowing orange, put the pyrometer on them, it hit 1,000 degrees. When the fire finally went out, took the plates out, and they were...
I'm sorry, Kevin, the lithium iron phosphate and a cathode gives off free oxygen, 340 or 350 centigrade.
Okay, it may have been giving off oxygen, but the lithium never reacted.
Okay. Well, no, we took a battery and demonstrated this at an EVCON out at the airport and overcharged it at like 10 amps. Byron, weren't you the one doing that?
I did.
It took an hour and a half or 2 hours.
We all did with smoke.
But the smoke would just make me sick.
We were up to 12 volts. The fire from the 100C LiPo was even better. It was a nice fireball.
See, the thing I've known all along about these fires is they weren't overcharged to 5 volts for 10 minutes. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about overcharging this pack for an hour hard. Where's this BMS? Well, in the case of this Princess of Scandinavia, this was a Brusa charger, which, by the way, is peculiarly good and accurate at terminating its charge on automatic. But these were in the car under CAN control from Dennis Dorfel's battery management system at the time the fire occurred.
I have a friend in the UK who had Dorfel's BMS, and he had a fire in his garage, which fortunately he caught in time. I don't know the details, but again, it was overnight.
My sympathies to your friend. It's a frightening thing if your garage is under your bedroom. It's the unintended part that's frightening. I burn up stuff all the time, but I'm there to cut the wires, or we used to keep some pruners around here, cable cutters, just to have handy because I was in the room.
Or more recently, the illegal Chinese warehouse right next door.
So.
You mean you shouldn't store your fireworks next to your people?
Well, here, we have
duh.
berms around them and concrete bunkers, but I don't know what they do in China.
So I think there's three things that I'm going to have to address in any conversation with Tesla about their charging network, or that we would have to address with a CHAdeMO network. And one of them is, are we going to burn to the ground in front of them? I think the second, and I'm actually of more concern, is our weenie car going to hog the stall for an hour when their people only need 20 to 30 minutes? And you get into some leaf situations to fully charge, it kind of goes on and on. And the third element is how are we to be compensated for the electricity? And I think we can answer all those. But that would be my three concerns were Steve West and Nick Smith. Are you hogging my fast charge station and keeping other people from getting into it? Are you gonna blow up in front of it and cause me to be on the evening news? And where's the money? And can anybody think of a fourth thing? Why you would have an objection to me pulling up and charging at your charge station?
Your vehicle's ratty.
Huh?
It's ugly.
You got an ugly car. Are we back to the little ugly in your mother dressing?
Just where we started.
Well, hey,
I've seen,
faction is as faction does.
I've seen poor placement of chargers to where they can get to about 1.5 cars on the average, instead of having your charging post in the middle of 4 spots in a dual parallel setup where the lanyard for your charge reaches 4 cars. So as soon as CHAdeMO would release, you could walk it over to the next car, you know. I've seen ASU screw the pooch on that one.
Yeah, now we're into etiquette. I'm heroically ambivalent on all that. We get, what's her name, Emily Post to draw up a thing and post it on the charge station.
The lock-in plug on the CHAdeMO to me is a very good feature because it removes the tamper feature. If you unplug somebody while they're charging and they're not getting the charge they paid for,
as long as it releases when you're done.
Yeah, it releases when you're done. So that
doesn't
goes
always.
away.
Tesla's had problems with their plug releasing. So.
Yeah, I have another take on that in that I'm charging my car, and there have been several incidents of this, and I'm pretty happy with the charge state at this point, and I'd like to go home, and it won't let go of my car.
There you go.
And there's nobody to call, and I can't get this unplugged.
You try throwing a bucket of water on it?
And it won't let you drive away anymore either, will it?
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of the CHAdeMOs that seem to have a stop button.
Why do you ask about your names, two dog fucking? Yeah. What time is it?
Lunchtime.
By golly, as it so happens, in a studiously bizarre turn while typing that the event is canceled, it occurred to me to call Ray and have him bring me one.